We know we need healthy boundaries to thrive in our workplaces. Without them, we can be subject to work calls and emails at all hours, exhaustion, feeling like we're being taken advantage of, not to mention feeling unappreciated. When you set boundaries, you don't just feel less stress and more empowered. You're demonstrating leadership skills that will help you craft the career you want on your terms. We need more women leaders in STEM, and honing your ability to set those boundaries and stay accountable is a foundational stepping stone to getting the respect you deserve so that you can enjoy the work you do and have a life outside of work too. In today's video, I'll share 7 actionable tips that help you set healthy boundaries at work. Number 1, focus on what you can control. Sometimes we think that boundaries are for other people, to get them to stop doing things that we don't want them to do. In reality, you can't control what other people think, what they feel, or what they do. You can influence that behavior, but ultimately, how other people choose to show up is on them. Whereas how you react when an event happens at work is on you. Boundaries aren't something you set because you want people to stop doing things to you. Instead, what you're doing is setting and communicating clear expectations. You've decided what is and is not okay with you, and you're telling someone how you intend to react when they cross a line with you. In Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he refers to this as the circle of control and influence. And so you can see on the screen on the left side a list of things you can control or change. On the right side, you can see a list of things you can't control and will result in a lot of undue stress and anxiety if you spend a lot of time worrying about it. Notice on the right side of the list things like what other people think of you, how other people treat you, and why someone did what they did. You can't change how someone else shows up. All you can do is focus on what you can control. And that's why this is the first step to setting your healthy boundaries at work. Number 2, give people the benefit of the doubt. Your work boundaries start with your personal boundaries. Those come from values and your own life experiences. And those boundaries are going to vary by individual. So in some cases, it will be obvious, for example, in cases of discrimination or harassment. But that's not the type of boundary I'm talking about here. Often, the areas where we have the most trouble setting and keeping accountable for our boundaries are what I call gray areas in which your boundary is being pushed on that may not be someone else's boundary. So I see this often as we talk about common microaggressions for women at work. For example, getting interrupted or talked over during meetings, an off-color joke, a joke about a women driver. For some people, it may not even occur to them that they've crossed a line. We often make the erroneous assumption that other people's boundaries are the same as our own, or that other people, once we speak up once, should just know our boundaries and not push on them so much. For example, it's well known that women in STEM get asked by both men and other women to do more non-promotable work, for example, taking those meeting minutes. So it feels like if you go and educate your manager about this, well, why wouldn't they stop asking you to take those notes for every single meeting? And it can be frustrating to have to reiterate that boundary over and over again. You can't thrive in any relationship, be it at work or home, without establishing those boundaries. And it's your responsibility to set them, repeat them as needed, and be accountable to them. Instead, what we often do when people cross our boundary lines is that we silently demonize the person who crossed that line, or we complain to everybody who will listen, instead of facing it head-on professionally. That's why number 2 is giving people the benefit of the doubt. Doing that doesn't mean that when they cross your boundaries, you let them off the hook. Absolutely not. It means that you make the assumption that they are well-intentioned and might be oblivious to the fact that they crossed a boundary. That gives you the opportunity to empower yourself to professionally decide how you are going to handle that situation. Number 3, keep it professional. Keeping it professional can be very difficult and challenging depending on the circumstances. This is especially true if you are the type of person, as are most of the women I coach, who are passionate about your work and pride yourselves on doing an excellent job. But here's the thing. Work is still business. And to be successful at work, we need to bring out our best professional selves. You know, that woman that stands up and owns the room, the one that's respected and gets things done. When we allow ourselves to take things personally, when we're receiving feedback or we got a performance review that we didn't like, we find ourselves in a place where we are mentally, if not verbally, blaming others for how they have made us feel. And that keeps you from showing up in a place of power, a place of professionalism in the workplace. That's why it's incredibly important to focus on the facts when you need to set boundaries. Take these two different emails, both around the same scenario of a manager emailing you with a last-minute urgent request at the end of the day. Which of these emails do you think is more professional? When you are setting or reiterating boundaries, keep it professional and factual. That means you're not blaming someone else for how you feel or how you're showing up. Again, you can't control what someone else is doing. Setting that boundary simply means you're giving them a heads up about what you're going to do when or if a line is crossed with you. Focus on the facts and keep your feelings out of your email correspondence. Number 4, communicate early. Establishing your healthy boundaries when you're not in a deadline or work emergency situation can prevent your boundaries from being pushed on or crossed at all. So, for example, when you're working from home, clearly communicating your work hours and when you will be responding to email. Also communicating what constitutes a work emergency so that you're not answering emails or calls that pop up during off hours. If you have a deadline coming up and you need critical information from someone else to meet that deadline, let them know well ahead of time, as well as the specific consequences if they do not get you their information in a timely fashion. Communicating your boundaries upfront and clearly avoids a lot of future miscommunications. And what I found in my own coaching practice is 9 times out of 10, where boundaries are falling short is often a struggle with communication as opposed to intentionally pushing on someone's boundaries. Number 5, get clear on your role. Do you have a current job description? Do you know what success metrics look like in your role and what you need to accomplish in your current role to get to the next level? I can't tell you how many STEM professionals don't have this information when we start working together, and I understand because I've been in that situation too. The problem is that when you're not clear on what success looks like in your role, it is much, much harder to establish boundaries around workloads, what is and isn't your job, because you're not sure what success is, and you feel like you have to say yes to every single thing thrown your way. You don't know what you can or should delegate, and you end up with a workload that is way too heavy for the number of hours in the day, and that leads to stress and even burnout. Write your own job description and show it to HR or your manager if you must. But getting clear on your role is an essential step to being able to set those healthy boundaries at work. Number 6, say no. Overextending yourself, saying yes to too much, is something that I have struggled with and something that a lot of women in STEM struggle with. Because, well, how do you say no while still being considered a team player, a go-to person, and without seeming rude? I wrote an entire blog on this topic about how to say no with grace, which I'll link in the description below this video, and you can check out. But the key here, before you say no, is to go back to number 5, to understand those success metrics in your role, because when you do that, that means you now have a litmus test for everything you say yes or no to at work. If it's not part of your role, It needs to be delegated unless there is a strategic reason for you to take on this particular task. So let's say it's a boss's pet project, or maybe you're just really excited about learning this new skill and taking on this project. Number 7, use processes. As engineers and STEM professionals, every day we use design thinking in our work, but we often do not apply the same design thinking to the structures and processes around our days, how we delegate, and how we manage. One of the biggest boundary-pushing culprits that contributes to high levels of stress is interruptions. When you're a manager, it can feel like every single person you're managing is constantly interrupting and coming to you and asking for you to make a decision or help them with something, which makes you feel like you can get no actual work done. It can also sometimes feel like it's just easier to do things yourself, which adds to your exhaustion level because what happens is you don't delegate. Even if you are not a manager yet, interruptions can create a ripple effect. When you pause to answer a question or check email quickly before you go back to your work, it takes the average of 20 minutes to get back into what you were doing prior. And that task switching time also adds up over the course of the day. And it can often lead to a situation where every new request feels like it's pushing on your boundaries because you are so overloaded with work. Examples of processes that aid in establishing boundaries include do not disturb work times. For many, that's the first 2 hours of the day. Establishing set times when you'll check email and respond, for example, 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. Establishing meeting times in particular times of the day so that your most important work can still get done uninterrupted. Delegating items that are not primary parts of your work function, and establishing when someone you're managing can make a decision themselves without you and when they have to ask you. To recap, here are the 7 tips for setting healthy boundaries for women in STEM. And I'd love to know in the comments, what healthy boundaries have you set at work? And if you found this video helpful and you want to learn more practical tools, tips, and strategies to find your voice, engineer a career on your terms, and make your mark on the world, be sure to subscribe to this channel.